Now that we've completed the work portion of our videos, let's proceed to the second part where we're going to configure CMS and web servers to brand our web app. So let's go and configure like tac. Welcome back to Like Tac. I'm Jim Jansen, and we just completed the work portion of our video series where we learned the requirements and steps required to brand our web app using a web server. Let's review those steps. In the first step, we need to create a zip archive file containing these files: favicon.png, sign_in_background.jpg, sign_in_logo.png, and text_strings.json. On my desktop, I prepared Rebels and Empire branding directories. If I go into Rebels branding directory, I see I have a favicon PNG, a sign-in background JPEG, a sign-in logo PNG, and a text_strings.json, the files required for branding. If you recall from the previous video, I can right-click on my favicon PNG, go to Properties, go to the Details tab, and I can see my image dimension is 32 by 32 pixels. The file name is favicon PNG, and the file size is 4.26 KB. All these attributes meet the requirements in the Cisco documentation for an image of a favicon. So this file is going to work for me. If I want to look at my text string JSON file in my programmer's editor, I just double click that. And I see my tokens. And I note that I'm using straight quotes on my tokens. I also see that the encode is UTF-8. So this file will work for me also. A common mistake that people make when they're preparing their archive files is they'll go outside the directory, highlight the directory, they'll right click, and they'll send to the compressed zip folder. This is a mistake. When you compress the directory level, you're not only compressing the directory, you're also compressing the zip files inside the directory. So when you upload this directory to the web server, CallBridge will fetch the directory, unzip the directory level, and then it'll see these zip files inside the directory and send those over to the web bridge. The web bridge will receive the zip file and not understand what these files are for and reject those files. So that's a mistake. What we want to do is go into the Rebels branding folder, and then we see our files again. We'll hit a Control-A to select all the files. We'll right-click on them and send them to the compressed zip folder while inside the directory. We're going to rename this file Rebel. And now we have a file that's prepared to be loaded in the web server. When this file is fetched by the call bridge, then it'll just unzip this Rebels zip and see the files that we see right now. So this is the proper way of zipping a file. Now that we have a properly prepared archive file, what's our next step? We see on step 2, on the web server, create a directory for the customization file and place the zip file in it. Back on my desktop, we see the rebels.zip file that we prepared for branding. I'm going to right click on that, copy it, and then I have an IIS server here that I prepared earlier. If I go into Windows Administrative Tools, I can go to the IIS Manager. In the IIS Manager, under the Sites and Default Websites, I see there's nothing prepared yet for branding. So how does this directory get created? We're going to go into File Explorer, and then we're going to go to the C drive, and we see this folder called initpub. We'll double click on initpub, and we see www root. This folder right here contains all our websites for IIS. When we go into that folder, we see that there's no directories created yet. So let's create a directory. We're going to call this directory brand rebel. So I know that this folder is going to contain my rebels zip. So if I go into that folder, I'll paste in my newly created rebels zip file. Now we can see that the rebels.zip file is under the brand rebel folder, where we can start branding our web app with a web server. If I go back to the Windows Administrative Tools and open up IIS Manager, and I go back to my web server and my sites and my default sites, now I see a web page where I can actually start doing some branding for brand rebel. Now we've properly prepared our web server with a brand rebels directory and put the rebels zip file into the brand rebel directory, we can now test to see if we can reach those files and download them into the CMS server and over to WebBridge. A good test for this is to put my PC on the same subnet as CMS and then enter the path to that web server. So let me do that. My web server is 14.49.18.252. If you recall, our directory folder was brand rebel, so let me put that in. And the zip archive is rebels.zip, so let's enter that. Let's see the results of our fetch. Okay, so the browser is telling me I'm unable to connect to that web server and fetch these files. If we're on the same subnet as CMS, CMS will not be able to fetch them either. So there must be something going on within IIS. Let's go back to IIS. Back on my Windows server, I'll go to Windows Administrative Tools, and I'll launch my IIS Manager. Under the website for IIS, I go back to my sites, my default sites, and I see brand rebel there still. Most administrators will not configure their default website for directory browsing and permissions and things of that sort. They usually are more specific to each website. So I'm going to go to the brand rebel website, and I'm going to look at permissions first. Under my sharing, I see that I have a share network path that's not shared yet. So let's go ahead and click Share, Administrator, Share. Now I got a created share. Also, let's look under Advanced Sharing. Right now I see that the share box is checked, so that's good. So let's go back to the web browser again and test again. Now that we have a share created, we highlight that and hit enter. I still have a problem with the share. I can't fetch those files. So let's go back to IIS again. Another common mistake is that directory browsing is not enabled. As you can see, I need to click enable for this to happen. If you do not have directory browsing enabled, I'm not able to browse to the rebels zip file. Another thing we can also look at is under File Explorer in the www root folder and look at the config file for brand rebel. If I look at this in my programmer's editor, I also see directory browse is enabled false. So that tells me again that I cannot browse to the rebel zip file. So let's correct that. Back in IIS, I'm under the brand rebel, and I'm going to go ahead and click enable. Now let's go see what the results is in our browser. I highlight the path again, and I still can't get there. So there must be something further we need to do to troubleshoot on IIS. Back in IIS, I go back to my brand rebel, and I right click and I edit permissions again. Now I want to go to NSF sharing. In NSF sharing, I want to go to the manage NSF sharing, and I want to start sharing this folder. I also want to go to permissions and allow root access to this folder, and we'll click OK. We'll apply, then we'll click OK, and OK again, and close. Let's go back to the browser and see what's happening now. I still cannot get to the fetch file, so let's go see what else troubleshooting we can do. We are back in IIS, and we're going to try to troubleshoot that certificate issue. One thing we can do is go back to our bindings for their default website, and we can highlight the HTTPS binding for port 443, and we can attempt to browse. When we do the browse, we can see that we can get to the brand rebel directory. If we click there, we can get to the archives. So this tells me the certificate is fine and that these bindings are fine. So what I've discovered in my lab is that I am using a VPN to get over to my DC, and since the DNS servers are different than the ones on the local server, I'm not able to resolve this path of 2016 DC brand rebel directory. So the way to correct that problem for our situation here today is just to go back to the binding, edit the binding, and remove the host name. Once I remove the host name, I'll double check my bindings again. I can still browse to the brand rebel and to the zip archive. So let's go back to the browser and see if we can do it from external. I'll put in https:// my server IP is 14.49.18.252, and then my brand rebel directory. And now I can get to my brand rebel directory. I can see my archive file. I can also test if I can download the archive file, and I can. Now that I have successfully used my browser externally to reach my web server, CMS should be able to do the same thing. These are the steps we use to troubleshoot and verify that we can get connectivity to our web server. So far, we have completed steps 1 and 2. Step 1, we created our archive file. Step 2, we prepared our web server and placed the archive file in a folder called brand rebel. Now let's go on to step 3. Using the API, create a WebBridge node specifying the URL of how C2W protocol will connect to the call bridge. For example, c2w://core1.cms3 jajansen.local:499999 will connect me to my call bridge. If we look at my command prompt for a moment for CMS Core 1, we see that we've already prepared a call bridge and a WebBridge 3. We have trusted the WebBridge and the call bridge with root CA cert. And we see the C2W protocol right here is whitelisting port A with the port number 4999. These configurations have to be prepared in advance to web app branding. Let's go to the CMS web interface to complete our tasks. Let's go to Configuration, API, and let's create us a web bridge. We see we have no web bridges created, and we need to put that URL that we were talking about earlier, c2w://core1.cms3 jajansen.local:4999 is going to get me to the call bridge. So I'll create that web bridge. All right, that is created. What's our next step? In step 4, using the API, create a WebBridge profile and specify in the resource archive field the URL to the web server where the zip file is held. For example, https://14.49.18.252 /branding rebel /rebels.zip. Back in CMS, let's create that WebBridge profile. We go to WebBridge profiles. We see we do not have one created yet. Let's create one. Our naming convention throughout this video has been Rebels. So let's call this profile Rebels. Now we have the resource archive to complete. We're going to enter our server 14, 49, 18, 252. And we recall that the folder that we put the Rebels zip file in was called brand rebel. And then we're going to put in rebels.zip. And let's create that. So our next step is, using the API, apply the WebBridge profile to the newly created WebBridge. So let's return to our object list. And let's go down to Web Bridges. We expand our Web Bridges. We see our newly created Web Bridge. We click on the Web Bridge, and we see the Web Bridge profile field is empty. So let's choose a Web Bridge profile. We see the Rebels Web Bridge profiles here. We select it, and then we're going to modify our Web Bridge. Our last step is to restart CallBridge. So let's go do that. On the command prompt, CallBridge restart. As you recall, when we're doing fetches for web servers, we have to restart the CallBridge. If we are doing local branding, we restart the WebBridge 3. So let's restart this. And that's successful. Now we have completed all the steps required for a web app to be branded by a web server. Let's test out our connection. If I put in https://14.49.18.248/ and choose English US Home, you see our branding is taking effect now. We have a background image with Chewbacca and Rey. We have a brand title, The Force Be With You. We have a brand subtitle, Rebel Alliance. We have a brand tag, The Force is Strong with This One. We have our join meeting and our sign-in meeting. And of course, we still have the Cisco brand logo here that cannot be removed. So it looks like we have successfully branded our web app with web server. I hope this video has been informative for you. Our next video will be CMS local branding. So subscribe to LikeTac to be informed when that video comes out.